Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Services. Well, that is post covering finance and property news. Another Monday, and Edwin is back for another rant just before the Melbourne Cup. Edwin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Martin. The question is, are you going to be backing a winner? And I'm not talking about the Melbourne Cup. I'm talking about, you're going to be backing whoever's going to dish out more incentives for, for us to vote. I know what's your call there, Martin? What's your call? And you can perhaps give us tips on the Melbourne Cup as well.
Well, I've no idea about the Melbourne Cup. I don't really follow it. And I'll be honest with you, the whole question of who bets on what, I find quite complicated. But I can, I think, give you a very firm tip. Albo's clearly signalling that an election is coming, and having pretty much failed on some of the other incentives and programs that he's run over recent times, he's now throwing a lifeline to young voters. Your HEX debt will be lower, and we're going to do free TAFE places and things like that. I can smell the election coming.
Oh, look, definitely, Martin. But the thing is, the interesting thing is, we could end up it could follow up with demonstrations on the streets, from all the tradies that they don't get their their tuition paid, do they? And everybody else that's been working for a while. So a business owner. Look at the business owners. Paul Bastards are. You could say I'm one of them because I run a small business. All the SMEs are absolutely getting hammered with all the red tape, all the costs of running an operation. If you want to run it properly, that is, if you want to pay your workers properly, if you want to, be properly insured, everything is litigation, and in order to cover yourself for litigation, in most cases, the unfortunate thing is the real estate industry is not covered for litigation because most of them are, you could say, are underinsured, and the policies don't cover all the shenanigans that is going on in the industry. But point is, the cost to run a small business is more, an SME, it's huge. I guess Albo or whoever's going to be the opposition at the time. I don't even think that Albo is going to be there personally, but he's lost favour with Taylor Swift, with all the Swifties want him out, and I sort of get the feeling it could be Penny Wong and somebody else. But anyway, that's just me. And then we've got another race tomorrow as well, or another area to place our bets. Is the RBA going to raise? Is it going to hold? Is it going to lower the cut? So it's the trifecta.
Yeah, well, it's just worth reflecting. This headline: Albanese kicks off the election mode with 20% off student loans. It's worth reflecting, of course, that what means that taxpayers effectively are on the hook for money that otherwise wouldn't be there. But interestingly, of course, if they do that, because of the way that the student loans are accounted for, it doesn't actually directly hit government debt. So it's quite a neat move to be effectively, greasing the palms of certain people who might be voting without actually hitting the budget too much. So that's an interesting observation. With regards to the RBA decision, it's pretty clear to me that there is too much inflation around to be able to deal with anything other than sticking with rates where they are. There was a headline here that basically said, no Christmas cheer as the RBA resists a cut. And that is simply because the latest inflation numbers were quite a lot stiffer, particularly services inflation. And of course, interestingly, the RBA looked through the government handouts for electricity and other things too, and the rental support, which is right because they're temporary measures. So the underlying rate of inflation is quite a lot stickier than many people want to recognise. Now, even CBA, who had been calling for a cut this year, now kicks it out to February. There's a bit of disagreement between the various people as to who look at this stuff as to whether it's going to be February or whether it's going to be later on. I don't think anybody knows quite. And it does actually depend a little bit on what happens in the US, because people need to understand, I think, that if Trump were to get back in, then the Trumpflation, as this article says, would make the RBA rate cut harder because, of course, with tariffs and probably a lot of borrowing, that's going to be a problem. But I'd make this point, Edwin. Whichever side of policy actually gets back in, and there's a lot of, speculation about polls and things. This slide just tells it all. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's the blue or the red. US debt's continuing to rise. Massive amounts of debt in the US is going to put interest rate pressure up, going to keep inflation high. And so whichever side of politics gets back in the US, the expectation of inflation coming back quickly is probably overdone, in my view. And, the amount of debt we're talking about here is massive, 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 and it sort of pales into insignificance with the debt problems we've got here. I did actually make a show called Australia, Land of Droughts, Flooding Rains, and Massive Household Debt, because the News Corp papers actually published some of my research that showed that massive amounts of household debt in some areas in Australia as well. So, the true story is the debt story. But of course, the newspapers are talking about no hope. Any hope of householders winning big on the Melbourne Cup day has been dashed, with broad consensus the Reserve Bank will not cut rates when it meets tomorrow. So that's my take. Probably sideways. Probably more saying, oh, well, we'll wait and see what happens, but no real expectation of a rate cut.
But look, you got to look at it. So you're just not looking at it on the bright side, Martin. Look, if Trump gets in, don't forget he gets in with you've got Elon Musk, our old mate Elon, and he's going to cut government spending. I mean, that is going to be absolutely awesome. I mean, if you can achieve, if you did it for Twitter, and he's running Twitter, I mean, these are just hearsays, but I know he's cut a lot of the overheads there in terms of the technicians and and engineers and everything. I mean, it's 20% of what it was when he bought it. So look, there is hope, Martin. There is hope. So likewise, they've got Elon, right? So the Republicans have got Elon there alongside, and we've got the Melbourne Cup, and this is what 7 News reporter put out. Let's let it all ride on a horse, and you could possibly get into the into a property on Wednesday. You can go and put a deposit down. I mean, this is just the sheer lunacy of what's going on in here in Australia. It's almost, it's a lottery. It's a lottery as to whether or not you're going to have a principal place of residence. It's a lottery whether or not you're going to have a longevity of tenure in a rental property. Now it's a lottery whether or not you're ever going to be sleeping in a proper bed, and perhaps even have 3 square meals and feel safe. This is where we're at, and why? All because of historical bad judgment and both sides of politics sticking their head in the sand, their heads in the sand, and not wanting to address the real problem. And they're just all they're doing is just showing the ass to or everybody else that wants to rape us and pillage us from all around the world. And that's where that's where we are. I mean, we've got major corporations buying out Australian land. We've got natural resources. We don't even own most of the waterways that the farmers use. It's a farce. We don't want to address that. That's taboo. That means that you're racist. That means that you're all sorts of things. because it's stopping. We're talking against the immigration policy because we got to save the rest of the world. Here's 26,000 people wanting to save what, the 4.5 billion people that house the 4.5 billion out there. I mean, it's crazy. Fair's fair. Fair's fair is what I'm calling, and let's let the genuine Aussies have a genuine go. We won't be able to do that until we address everything holistically. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. We just want to create stories, clickbait, feel good articles, dance at Taylor Swift concerts, or Bon Jovi or whoever you fancy, Def Leppard or whatever. I don't know, whatever your fancy is. I mean, that's a silliness of the persona that we are of the politicians that we put in a power. And that's where we are. And then from there, of course, from the great halls of Parliament comes the idiotic policies that we get landed with.
Well, yes, it's interesting. Finder actually did quite an interesting report. It was published in the papers. 462,000 Aussies could be forced to sell their homes by February. 1 in 7, the equivalent of 462,000 mortgage holders, said they may have to sell or apply for hardship if interest rates remained the same until February 2025. And further still, an equivalent of 1.3 million mortgage holders will have to cut back further to keep affording their mortgage over the coming months. Now, that's, of course, quite consistent with my own research, and I've been talking about this for quite some time. So that's the sort of the first leg of the stool, as it were, in terms of the pressures that are there. And yet, here's another angle, 969,000 international students enrollments in Australia. Something doesn't work at the moment. Australia doesn't seem to be for its people.
No, you could say I dated back to 2012, 2013, when the FIRB regulations were watered down so much that every Tom, Dick, and Harry from overseas could literally buy us out, and that's some may say it goes further back than that, but that was a major change, policy change that really changed the landscape, and in particular the residential landscape of property ownership in Australia, predominantly in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane. Many thought the 90s was when everyone was talking about the Japanese invading Queensland. But I'd sort of pinpoint it more to the changes in 2012, 2013. But like I said, I keep on saying over and over again, Martin, you can't take a drug addict. You can't they've got to go cold turkey. Minimizing the heroin dose isn't going to really do a great deal. Likewise with the politicians, they're hooked on the stamp duty tax and every other tax that comes their way by building new, and that's their push. That will always be the push. That will be consistent push for that, and they know if the money's drying up here from the local community, well then they've got to get it from the pundits from overseas. But at the end of the day, we're still relatively a small nation, and we're still relatively a small market in comparison to the rest of the world. Hence the reason why we've gained favour. We continue to gain favour and flavour with those that want to escape the US, those that want to escape Canada, those that want to escape Europe and the Middle East, Asia, wherever all these troubles are brewing, abroad. And very soon we're going to be overrun by Tasmanians and New Zealanders as well.
Well, there was an interesting piece of data, this is from the FIRB, that showed that around 5,360 purchase transactions this is 2022, 23, came from overseas buyers. And of course, they have to be reported and confirmed. But I thought what was interesting, two things. Firstly, look at Victoria, 2,240 transactions, 569 transactions over 1 million. So that was actually the highest. But also, look at the proportion of new dwellings versus established dwellings and vacant land. It's quite interesting just watching the distributions and how different the distributions are in different places. So again, it shows you that the policies that were being pushed haven't really worked. And so, massive numbers of students coming into the country. We've still got people from overseas buying into Australian property, including existing established properties as well as new properties. So once again, you're right. The parameters that have been set by both state and federal are actually messing with the property market to the extent that locals are being priced out. And there's no real intent to solve any of this. There's no real intent to deal with the fallout of this. And it's just another reason why property prices are still way, way high. I said earlier on that the story is that the debt to income ratios are higher here than almost anywhere else. And quite fascinating to see that the number of people who are worried now about what's happening in the property market is rising. I mentioned Finder earlier on. All of those things are in play. So you wonder how it's going to actually play out, bearing in mind, of course, we've said before, and it's worth just highlighting again, that building costs are continuing to rise. So not surprising, the costs, for example, in WA soared 20.3% in the year to September. The laying a brick, $3.10 a brick above the $3 mark they hit during the pandemic, they say. And that just shows you that trying to actually build stuff is almost impossible if you're going to actually want to make any profit in all of this. So no surprise then that people are struggling with the story here. And then interestingly, the RBA also made the point that the limiting the CGG and negative gearing probably wouldn't have a huge impact on the market. Some people were sort of grizzling that it would actually kill the market completely, but the RBA is saying, it probably doesn't have a major impact either way, which is quite an interesting line of argument. But again, we are messing around the edge here. We're not actually getting into the real story. And of course, the latest information from CoreLogic showed that we've now got Sydney house prices on average falling just slightly. Now, the lower end prices are still going up, but the upper end prices are falling. Places like Vaucluse, for example, and other areas like that at the top end. And in fact, there was an article here that made that point, that if you look at places like Cabramatta and Fairfield, for example, and Wentworthville, those median prices are still rising, whereas Vaucluse, Surrey Hills, Cronulla, places like that, Woollahra, they're actually falling. So there's some really weird stuff going on. I actually did a show on that called The Property Price Downturn is Spreading, but it's not uniform. And once again, I feel that we're not getting the full story here, right? But, people are not tackling the fundamental structural issues we've got. They're sort of going around here, as you say, more announceables.
Yeah, no, well, that's right. But just to bring it into context, there's about 45,000 on average, 45,000 bricks required to build your average home now, which is a four bedroom with a garage. So you multiply 45,000 times $3 to have it laid, and I dare say that would you'd also have to provide the cement, lime, and everything else that goes with it. So there's your cost. See, this is the. I like to get into the nitty gritty, the real numbers. So talking to some of the developers now, where we were talking about the cost to build the dog boxes, or the dog box, shoe box, whatever you want to call it, the apartments, each unit in a complex in Sydney on average is now $580,000, and it's increasing. And now we've got they're starting to one of the other reasons why developers the mid-tier, they don't want to build, don't want to get their hands dirty because they don't want to lose money. Because you've got to now add on top of council contributions, you've now got to add all the extra costs that a developer build has to, incurs in building, all due to, it's not a bad thing, but it's an added cost, which is all due to the building commissioner's requirements for all the reporting and the reports that are required. Add another $20,000 to that. So the cost to build is only increasing; it's not decreasing, and people don't realize how much, how much. And what the other thing is whilst the industry has tasted blood, what the industry has tasted the high pricing, they're not going to go back. It's going to be very, very difficult to go back. It's I use the analogy of I don't know how I come up with it. Probably watching too many Disney movies or some shit like that. But urban legends, urban myths, whatever. So if you give a young cub with a lion cub or a wolf cub or whatever, you give them, if you let them taste raw blood, you'll never take that savagery out of them. But if they don't taste blood, then you got more chances of having a pet, a closest thing to a pet that perhaps may not attack you or anybody else. But it's the same thing. Now that the building industry has tasted this blood, they don't want to go back. They don't want to go back to charging $1.10 or $1.20 to lay bricks. You got to be mad. And everything else. They don't want to go back to what they were charging 12 months, 18 months ago. And this is where the fundamentals of where we are. And again, for me, the root cause of this problem is because the state governments just dropped the ball on the apprenticeships. Dropped the ball on. There was this big push, state government, and big push, on families, for this, higher education, education pathway to higher education, which meant that you took, kids that should never have gone to year 11 and 12, should have just gone straight from year 10 into an apprenticeship like we used to, and would have done very, very well. And then you end up with, unfortunately, they don't cut the mustard in, they get to year 12 and then they still don't cut the mustard. And so it's this whole delay, it's this whole notion of, keeping people. It's almost like China. What China is doing now to their population is they want to keep the population for as long as they can, under the education system, because they know once they get out of the education system, they've got to go out and look for work, and there's just no jobs available. So you've got people with PhDs, doctorates, fulfilling roles of floor managers at department stores and secretaries in law firms, this sort of stuff. I mean, this is, but you go back, when did all these change? When did this notion because when did we start changing this, looking at this? I guess it's, a lot of it started changing in the 80s and in the 90s, because you didn't, if you were a blue collar worker, you were looked down upon almost. I mean, you were almost like a second rate citizen. And here we are, going back to the point on the markets. Yeah, you've got a lot of LGAs. You've got the Parramatta LGA. You've got the Blacktown LGA, Penrith, Cumberland. Many of those LGAs, Liverpool, Fairfield, they're going up. They're going up in value in a lot of the markets, internal markets. The properties are going up in value, and then there's a lot of your North Shores, your eastern suburbs, and that they're somewhat stagnant. and you could basically haggle a lot more in the affluent areas, because you can, because people are a little bit more desperate than what they are out in the burbs, as they say. But yeah, this is fundamentally where everybody needs to take a deep breath and look and see what markets and what type of property in that market. As we said last week, there was gobsmacking that there were two sales last week in King's Landing, one at 1.9 and one close to 1.8 of homes in there, which it was unheard of. But homes that need a lot of work, a lot of renovation, $200,000-300,000 worth of rent, they're still fetching 2.35, 1.35, 1.4, and you still got to put in $200,000 to $300,000 to get them up to scratch, in order to to do when you're doing a proper renovation. So this is what's happening out there, and you've got to you've got to pay attention to those to those points. Otherwise, you lose track, and you could you could say that because we're not building anything substantively anyway, there's not a lot of greater choice other than the crap that's been put on the market as a test case to see if that'll be offloaded with the good stuff that it's still in many parts of Sydney, it's still very much in high demand. So yeah, the fundamentals are not changing from what we see on the ground. As I was talking to a couple of people, until we see another 360 cranes around Sydney, and until we see a lot more medium density development in many suburbs, there's not a lot of choice. And then but the big push is for the high rise. Big pushes for the high rise. State government's pushing for high rise. Federal government's pushing for high rise. Other than your local government isn't really interested in the high rise, but it's this this war, damned if you do, damned if you don't type of scenario. But in the meantime, nothing, in my opinion, nothing substantive is really happening. So going back to that report of the 400 and something thousand households that are in dire straits, look, at this point, and tracking the numbers, even tracking the numbers in the main capital cities, there's got to be, first and foremost, the majority of the buyers want to buy into homes, freestanding homes. They're not really interested in apartments. Secondly, I mean, there's a few that are, but you've got to be really wary as to, if you're going to park yourself in an apartment, you got to do a lot more research, as far as I'm concerned. But and then the other thing there is Martin, is the areas that are desirable, with a lot of the people that are suffering, are not necessarily in the preferred areas that most of the buyers want to be in. And then you start talking about cost of living. My take on that, Martin, is that we are seeing a lot more property on the market across Sydney anyway. In many markets we are seeing, but buyers are still there, and they're absorbing a lot slower, but they are being absorbed. A lot of markets have plateaued. There's you've got to have a lot more on market in order for us to comfortably say, yeah, the market is dropping across the board. Then you've got the situation where you've got the relief from the banks. Don't forget the legislation that got brought out in 2010, and a lot of households are going to avail themselves of that in order to basically, pay less, but increase the mortgage tenure. Long term, they're going to be paying a lot more. But you know what? At the end of the day, they've still got a roof over their heads. So it's really diabolical what's out there, what people have to navigate through, and all because of these nitwits that are governing us and have been governing us for the last 20, 30 years.
I'm not sure governing is the right word. They've been appointed to do things. Whether they did is a different question. I make one interesting point. Just going back to the movement in prices, it is interesting that according to CoreLogic, Melbourne prices were down 1.8% in October, and Sydney prices just eased a little bit as well. But I'm fascinated by this. If you go to some of the other reporters, and PropTrack is one that comes up quite often now. Fascinating to see that PropTrack said, wait for it, Melbourne property market rallied through October, rising for the first time after a prolonged downturn. For the first time in 6 months, the housing researcher PropTrack's monthly house price index recorded a price rise in the Victorian capital, up 0.49% through to October. The lift was larger than any other major city. I don't know. Who do you believe? It just shows you that these indices are all over the place, and really you can't you can't really take them on much value at all. They're averaging and all sorts of other things. So did prices go up or did prices go down? And the answer is, well, yes. There are some prices did go up, some prices did go down, and so it depends a little bit on how you actually crunch all those numbers and put them together. I want people to understand, Edwin, that these top-level indices are so Mickey Mouse as to be, well, not that useful. And we always say you have to go granular. You have to understand what's really going on the ground, and that's really the only time that you really will then understand enough to be able to make sense of what's going on. I'd also make the other point. In Melbourne, of course, there's been this massive drive towards the high rise. There were some announcements quite recently, but this article is quite interesting, right? Minister behind the Brighton Towers is opposed to homes in his own seat. So don't do as I do, do as I say, right? It is remarkable.
No different to what Chris has got here. He's got a fight on his hands here in New South Wales as well. The LGAs in the main part, they don't want these high-rise monstrosities because they know what the issues that arise further afield once they're occupied. They end up being multi-million-dollar ghettos because they're not looked after, and then who wants to build? The word in the industry at the moment is that some second, more third tier builders are gonna have a crack at this because they're going like in the not the bigger developments, but your 6-level developments in the not in your affluent areas, but more in, let's call it the west of Sydney, and the industry is looking at this. The stakeholders in that industry, the developers in that we talk to, they're sort of thinking to themselves, well, okay, let's see what sort of a mess do we end up after they get completed, and a couple of years down the track, because the ones that can build, the ones that, as I said, you can, there's only a handful of them that can build, and that are going to be there for the long term for people to claim against should anything be defective or faulty. Well, they're holding back. They're still holding back because the numbers just don't add up. The smarter ones. As I said before, many months ago, I said before the beginning of the year, the smarter ones, probably also last year, moved over to your more containable developments, as in your duplexes, that type of subdividing blocks into 2 dwellings, semi-detached, detached, or attached. In our areas, of high return, where you end up with, and they're managing not only one, but they're managing 4, 5, or 6 at a time, because they know that apartments are just not viable to build and to resell. And why would you want to be buying something off the plan at $1.2 million when you can buy something that's established at 750, 800,000 anyway? Better the devil you know than the one that you don't know that's going to bite your ass in the future. But that's the push. That's the government push. This is an email to also one of someone reached out to ask me as to what was what was happening with some of the areas that they're looking at buying in medium density, and I said, look, ring up the council and find out. And then this was the response email, and it says, hey, I contacted the Coolinghi Council. They're currently in court with the state government. There you go. So because there's no detail. I don't blame the local governments for taking the state government to court, because they want a fine. They want a definition of the detail. Apart from the fact that politicians are hypocritical in so do as I say, not as I do. We know that's just a given. But outside of that is the whole notion of show me the detail. The devil's in the detail, but in this, in many instances that the LGAs are fighting, there is no detail. We've got this notion that we're going to, which we shared earlier on in the year. I said, watch this space, because there's a Christmas surprise for would-be developers and property flippers and those that want to get into the small projects, where just about every block of land, within a certain radius of a commercial hub, shopping centre, or transport, is going to be deemed to be a duplex site. But what are the controls? There's no detail in as to the controls. What are they going to be? And this is what the local governments are also fighting against. There's already a lot of red tape, so we're going to be in litigation for quite a while before things get built. But in the meantime, we go back to the 900 and something thousand students. We go back to the to visa approvals. We go back to open borders in relation to money coming in to buy residential property, and not necessarily new. You mentioned earlier on as to the what the Foreign Investment Review report said, but I asked the question, Martin. That's what's noted through the proper channels. What's being bought through the bare trust? What's being noted through what I otherwise call the syndicates? In other words, family members or friends that are holding wads of cash or money from overseas here on behalf of somebody else, which is your typical unit trust. Sorry, not unit trust. Your bare trust, where you don't know who really owns it. And what about the even the students? They're allowed to buy established dwellings as long as they sell the dwelling when they finish when they leave the country. But we know that the pathways that are being established from 2019 for a lot of the students, which you and I reported years ago, we said, watch this space, because the education pathway has changed, where after achieving certain levels of education, tertiary education, whether it be your bachelor's, your master's, your doctorate, after that you get a certain amount of years that you can stay in the country to work legitimately and earn an income. But then they got doubled, which was a clear indication that they really don't want these people to go back to. They want them to stay. It's a clear pathway to PR, and this is what the WeChat Charter has told us years ago, and this is what we reported on. And this is where we are. The devil is in the detail. The devil's in the detail, not in the percentages, not in the percentages in the hidden facts or the reporting. When you start seriously looking at the numbers, you get a better idea and understanding as to how we really are tracking, and you get a better indication of what what property prices are going to be doing across the cities and the areas that our viewers and our followers are looking into.
Yeah, and it's just worth looking at this particular piece of news item. So the ALP approves 120,000 visa arrivals for families of foreigners studying here. And they said more than 120,000 arrivals of relatives of foreign students have been recorded using special visas under the Albanese government, with 1 in 5 not taking part in any education. And tens of thousands of recipients of so-called secondary student visas have swept into Australia because a relative or spouse is studying here, according to new figures. That's another little angle on this. So again, you've got to go granular. You've got to look at the detail to really understand what's going on. Again, Albo's opened the doors and people have walked through, and they're not bending the rules. They're just going with the rules, but the net effect of all of that is putting more pressure on the property sector. And, the more you look at it, the more you realize that governments really don't want to solve the problem, right? They really don't. All they want to do is to get to the next election and get re-elected. So that's all they're worried about. And look, I must make this point. The property market has been so politicized for years and years and years, both sides of politics. And the latest, of course, is the current inquiry into whether we should actually change the serviceability buffers, particularly for first-time buyers. There's a current inquiry going on at the moment. I made a show about it the other day. It's remarkable, really, to think that with this amount of debt we've got in the system and the amount of pressure on households, there is now an attempt within the parliamentary system to effectively put more pressure on APRA to effectively reduce the serviceability buffer, the 3%, which is there at the moment. And interestingly, the inquiry that ran just over a week ago, almost everybody was saying, no, don't change it. There's already enough pressure here. But a couple of the banks were very keen to allow the first-time buyers to be able to actually go in with a smaller buffer. And interestingly, the Conservative side of policy, Andrew Braggs in particular, is really pushing this very hard. Now, he's, of course, running this inquiry. So the question is, objectivity is an interesting question here. It's really important to have an objective view. But my view is that you should not just pile up more people with more debt in the current environment, given where we are, given the debt-income ratios and everything else. And of course, the only winners at the end of the day are the politicians and the bankers.
100%. But the thing is, Martin, we've been here before, 2019, and it's Deja Vu. That's what I put up there on my X post. Hey Siri, give me the definition of deja vu, or am I looking for the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome? But then I started to think a little bit more about it this afternoon, and then you realize that this is really a promotion to assist people to buy into, to start splashing money and start putting deposits on off the plan apartments. They need to sell these things that they want to build. If they don't sell them, the rich chatterers don't want them. The investors don't want them. So they really got to push the younger generation into these high-rise monstrosities that are going to be built in the wrong areas. And you don't know what, like I said, you don't know what you're going to get at the end of the day. So you need this. You need them in order for them to be able to comfortably go up. And I'm not saying that that they're going to be able to settle, or that the things are going to be settled, or how long it's going to take builders to build. Under the current environment that we're in, if you start putting shovel to the ground tomorrow, I don't see them getting the key to get in, for the next 4 to 5 years anyway. So, but you need to get this. You need to get that movement happening, because otherwise, as I said earlier, the developers aren't moving. They're not budging. So you're really forcing the younger generation to move into these off the plan purchases that are overpriced, overvalued currently, and they're and under-engineered. But you need them in order to motivate the developers. If you don't motivate the developers to build, who's going to build? We're already importing 100,000 or so builders. Or is the CFMEU going to allow us to import another 300,000 to build because the current builders here don't want to build anyway? I mean, it's crazy. That's the only thing that I could come up with. And again, looking, pushing them into corralling them as you said, into a mortgage, which is into a death, being slave to till death to debt, because they want to get political brownie points so that they can win the next election. Yeah. I could be wrong, but that's my 10 bobs worth.
Yeah, well, that's quite right. So the politicians are actually concerned about getting re-elected more than anything else, and will do anything to try and get one more vote, I suppose. But it's not good, and I remind you of what I said earlier on about Australia, the land of drought, storms, and massive amounts of debt. Now, let's move the conversation forward, because this is another very important story. Can you believe co-listings seem to be coming back? And you actually made a post on this, Edwin. And this is quite remarkable, right? We haven't seen this before. Well, not recently anyway.
No, it was a thing many years ago. Look, it caught my attention because not only is there one, but I know of in the area there's actually three. And I posted two. Then I was made aware of another one around the corner from these two that I posted. And this is interesting, from the point of view of that you've got major offices that have co-listed two properties. They're currently on the market, but the point that I want to raise there is, apart from the fact that the co-listing, that's, as I said, that's an interesting scenario in itself. But it's more interesting is how they also collude in deceptive, deceptive and bait advertising, because we know the owners, we know of the owners, we know what their expectations are, and we've got the receipts. And the interesting thing is that you've got parties very in one instance you've got licensees in charge of two of the officers that are running the campaign, and they've agreed, as I said, to not to have an exclusive agency agreement is one thing, but they've also agreed to price it low so they can watch it go. The old motto, as the old motto goes, and in other words, they're deceiving the general public. They are guiding 4.8, and I know for a fact from the owner's own mouth and from various sources that speak with the owner, know for a fact that the owner wants no less than 5.5, and as a matter of fact, he's looking at getting closer to the 5.8 on the day of the auction. But the other question is it going to work? Is this going to be working in the favour of the of the vendor, who one would say allegedly is colluding with the agents as well, is in collusion with the agents, and to deceive the general public in a soft market, in a market where the high-end properties are losing a little bit of traction with buyers, in the sense of the buyers aren't tripping over themselves to buy. Is this the best strategy? Is this a good strategy to undertake, or is it only just going to be pushing the prices down? And these are discussions that I've been having with local agents in the area, local agents that I know. because obviously it's going to affect the price points of other properties in the area as well after the event. In other words, after the auction campaigns or after the day of the auction. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a watch this space. But I've also tried to reach out to some of the mainstream media and Chris, as well, because Martin, we've got the receipts. We've got the receipts, and our viewers can see the receipts. I've put one of them up on one of the posts. This is conversations with the local agents and conversations with, those that know the owners, that I've been having. I try to get as much as I can in writing. I've got the full transcript. I try to avoid putting in, noting now who I'm talking to or who's it from, or try to eliminate as many of those connections, because I feel that these are damning receipts, and and it needs to be looked at. It seriously needs to be looked at. Our viewers can read that, and there it's in black and white, as they say. How agents, I mean, if the guide is low, it will. This is the conversation with local agents. If the guide is low, it will attract buyers. We can't be guiding at 3.9. It will burn the campaign. Trust me. I mean, they want 4 million for this property, for one of the properties, and at the moment they're guiding 3.3. I mean, this is insane stuff. But the local agents know it, the industry knows it, and it's really a middle finger up to the regulators, because it's done right in front of their face, and they just don't care. And if they get caught, Martin, what's the penalty? $2,500 in the black mark against your name?
Well, it just shows you it goes on below the waterline. And, how is a price determined? It's not as simple and straightforward. And as we've said before, bait. It's all about bait advertising and trying to get people through the door, and then trying to close the gap between what the vendor is being set as a high expectation initially, and then what the low number out in the market is, and then they try and wedge the two together. And who wins? The agent. Who loses?
Yeah, the agent always comes out winning. The agent's the winner. But you know what, Martin? I love using their strategy. I love using their strategy against them, because you've got the local agents in certain areas, I mean, certain parts of Sydney that were looking for clients, and you've got a fully renovated home. They're guiding at 3 million. You know very well that the fully renovated home in the north region is, that home any day of the week is valued at 3.4. A bit more emotion there. Depends who turns up on the day. You could be paying even 3.5 for it. But the guiding 3 million, they give you this bullshit when you go and ask them for the vendor's expectation. Oh, it's the first week of the campaign, and we're just waiting for the market to dictate what it will it will be. I'll tell you what I'm dictating. I'm dictating that if you want 3 million for it, I'll sign the check today on behalf of my client. How's that? Put that to your vendor. But we know what they do. I mean, I have my conversations with them. Sometimes I'm cheeky, sometimes I just don't bother with it. But then you look at another property, around the corner from that one, and it's similar vein, similar land size, position a little bit better, not as attractive because it hasn't been renovated. And guess what? And they're trying to get, they were trying to get in their campaign 3 million, but now they've got a private treaty sale, and they've actually got a guide on the private treaty sale at 2.8. And go in there and I like it. Yeah, look, it's good. It's attractive. It's sitting down with the clients and say, look, we could get this and spend 150,000. It'll even be better than the one that's renovated down the road or around the corner from this one. But why can you do that? because now the agent is saying, oh, that's the guy, but the vendor is expecting a little bit closer to the 3 million. I said, mate, your colleague around the corner, your colleague opposition, your compadre, compatriot, your mate, around the corner, has got a fully renovated house in the guiding 3 million. Take away the renovations, puts this one at 2.5. So the 2.8 offer is a generous offer. Put it to your vendor. That's how you use it against them. They use their own stupid strategy against, and that's what happens, Martin. That's what happens. But as you said, at the end of the day, the losers are the vendors. The winners will always be the selling agent because they walk away with a commission.
Absolutely, and it shows you that price action on one property has a flow-on effect elsewhere, and that's the point, because the market is quite connected if it's in the local area, and that's people need to understand that. Now, as we come towards the end, Edwin, before we get into the numbers, it's just worth, I think, looking at this one. The WeChat chatters are saying maybe Darwin.
Yeah, well, we called it a few weeks back. Remember, we said that all those investment properties that were being bought over in Darwin. This is one of your avid followers, where he often contributes to the live shows. He sent us that he's in Darwin, and he said, "Hey, what you guys were talking about? Came out in the Northern Territory News." So we're ahead of the curve. We bought out weeks before this headline came out on the mainstream media. They're talking about. And they've been buying a lot, as a matter of fact, up there. I still call a lot of those places that they're buying into one-trick ponies, and you've got to be very, very careful, because once that if they flog that pony too hard and he dies, so does the market around him. So it's really be wary. I'm very, very wary of those markets, but each to their own. And the other topic of discussion with the WeChat chatter is, of course, is the push for the high-rise development that the state governments have been banging on about, and trying to get across the line. And but the chatter with them is amongst themselves around the groups, as Dusty explains to me, is really they're trying to work out who's going to buy these, other than the push for the first-home buyers to buy these and incentivize the first-home buyers, future first-home buyers, because they're not going to be built for another 3, 4, 5 years anyway, to live in there. And a lot of them are talking, maybe in the more affluent areas, it'll be the honkies that will continue to come into Australia, and Singaporeans, and individuals from Asian countries that outside of mainland China that are used to living in high-rise developments and are prepared to pay good money for them. But that'll be more in the affluent areas, and also in those hubs like your Chatswoods, your Eppings, your Lower North Shores, places like that. They're not going to go live in the high rise in your Blacktown or Penrith.
Absolutely. Well, it shows you, I think, how the markets are evolving. But again, we're ahead of the curve. We keep calling it out, and anybody who's been following us for the last little while will be hopefully ahead of the curve too. Now, let's just quickly look at the numbers. So in Sydney, on the 28th of October, there were 21,919 properties listed on Domain for the Sydney region, as defined by Domain. And the following week, 21,745. So that's an interesting little development there in terms of the numbers. Looking at the chart, slight ease back, but still significantly above where we were compared with last year. And once again, I think, Edwin, the quality of property on the market is quite varied. There are a number of properties that probably are really not that attractive, but are still being called at the moment.
No, there's a lot of property stays on the market post the auctions because of the high expectations. That let's not forget that the high expectations that a lot of the vendors have is because the agents told them they bought the listings, and the agents told them they were going to get this much, and they're not getting it. So obviously they're going, they're belaboring the campaign. One of a property that I'm keeping a very close eye on is my mate's property that I've been sharing up on X not the address or anything like that, but just the general conversation about it, where the agent told him he's going to get $2.1 million every day of the week, mate. Every day of the week, I'll get you 2.1 million. Well, that's market dictating. That's what I'll get you. So far the guide is at 1.8 and still got no offers. And that's what happened. But my mate, foolishly got conned into believing this dipstick that he's going to get between 2 million and 2.1. He got, he really got sold the goods, and now, he's forever asking me, "Oh, what do you think? What do you think?" My response consistently, because he didn't listen to me, my response to him is, "Mate, you got a professional. Go ask him." You should.
Yeah, define
Apart from the fact
professional.
that
Define professional.
apart from the fact that you're meant to be my mate, you went behind my back because you got greedy, because he sold you he sold you a bag of dog doo doo, and you thought it was fudge sundae or some shit. And then that was it. So
Oh dear.
deal with it.
Mm.
Live through it. And then when the contract's over, and that was another thing, bastard. I said to him, don't sign anything more than 8 to 10 weeks. 8 weeks tops, because the campaign was only 4 weeks. Give him another 2 weeks after that, and that's it. But now he even gave him 3 months. I said, if he's promising you the world, why give him 3 months? So anyway, it is what it is. People don't know.
Yeah, if people want more on that, look at our recent live show where we went into this issue of do you need a real estate agent, and how do you pick a good one from a bad one, and can you do alternatives? So now let's look at the Melbourne numbers just briefly. So last week on the 28th, 30,507 in the Melbourne region on domain. 30,836 the following week. So unlike Sydney, it continues to rise, and that's a consistent trend we've seen for some time. In the Brisbane market, on the 28th, 4,258. A week later, 4,260. So it's a little bit up, but interestingly, we're starting to see some easing back. The growth is still there in value, but not as strongly as previously. And just on the auctions front, Edwin, we are still seeing a lot of auctions being passed in, or indeed property removed ahead of the auction, and then appearing as a private treaty sale later.
Yeah, and I try to look at the auction numbers. Obviously, look at the auction numbers on the Monday, and then I'll look at them again on the Friday. And last week, from the 900 and something, 960 something, we ended up down to 700. So not from 922, we ended up to 756, I think it was, by Friday. So yeah, a lot of get absorbed beforehand, and then a lot of get passed in for the next week, and goes on to the tally. The interesting thing with Melbourne is that we've got a rise. People still prefer to sell their investment properties that they're vacant, they're untenanted. And some of those are going back to the rental ledger, which we'll look at the rental numbers a bit, in a bit, in Melbourne, because the rental numbers have gone up as well. So because obviously the sales aren't being absorbed as quickly as that would expect, and they can't have them vacant for too long, because they've still got to pay the land tax, and still got to pay all the other taxes and overheads that the investors are in for. But it's interesting how, regardless of the fact that the rental numbers have risen somewhat, which is a good thing for those that are looking for a rental, but we also got a continual steady increase in sales. So people still not perturbed. They want out of Melbourne.
Yeah, well, we're seeing that. And not surprisingly, when you look at the net investment yields, as I calculate on an ongoing basis, they continue to deteriorate in Melbourne. Higher taxes, higher costs, all of those things. So the investment proposition for many people just doesn't work. Let's look at the rentals quickly. So in Sydney on the 28th, 11,934. Next week on the 4th of November, 12,331. So a rise. And in Melbourne, as you say, 11,332 on the 28th. 11,635 the week later. So once again, as you say, there's more stuff coming on. Interestingly, the latest CPI on rent was still quite high, just slightly down, just down a little. But of course, there was also the rental assistance program that actually helped. So in a way, it's masked some of the changes in the rentals as well. And certainly in my surveys and when I have one-on-one conversations, people are still struggling to be able to afford somewhere to rent if they can find anywhere to rent that's decent, which of course is a big question because a lot of the stuff that's on the market now for rent is pretty shoddy, really, and probably is not going to change anytime soon. Now, before we end the show, your tip of the week, and this is a really, really important one, especially if you've got an extension on a property you're looking at.
Look, definitely. I know we've discussed this topic before in general terms over our live shows and that, but I thought it was because of the areas that we're looking for clients at the moment, both in the North Shore West and also the Inner West. And I've been somewhat a bit more involved with the Inner West personally, and it's interesting how you notice and pay close attention to the price points where we've got your 2 million entry points, and in your North Shores, your 3.5 million entry points, and you see these homes with extensions. And just because it's got an extension that it's still upright doesn't mean that it's council approved, right? And also, just because your solicitors, just because the real estate agent tells you, oh yeah, they bought it like that, and they bought it 7 years ago or 10 years ago like that, and they haven't had any problems, doesn't mean that you're going to have problems, because your neighbor, the neighbor may not like you, and they'll dob you in because it's usually neighbors that dob them in, and then they end up with all sorts of grief, like many homes around Sydney that we've inspected, and I've gone to the council to see if things have been approved. So as I said, the entry points in parts of Sydney that I'm looking at, your entry point is 2 million, and then in the other parts of Sydney, your 3.5s. And so when you get a demolition order, or you get a please explain order, it costs you hundreds, if not the potential cost of building half a house after you have to demolish it and rebuild it. And that doesn't mean to say that the council is going to approve what was built anyway. So they're things that you need to convey when you see extensions, or you need to convey these to the to your solicitor or conveyancer, so that they can do the proper checks and balances and ask the right questions. I mean, I saw one that had an extension to the rear of the property, and it was good. I mean, I must say, on face value, it was really good. It looked good. It looked tight. But then when I went outside, I mean, they said it was architecturally designed, and it was designed by this local architect, blah blah blah. All that. It sounds all good, but at the end of the day, it all looks good and on shiny and glossy paper. A1 size sheets on the plans, but it's how the builder executed those plans that is important. You got your control joints were uneven, where they cut the brickwork to put up the new stuff was all over the place. So it looked, as they say, looked good from far, but it was far from good. And then when I stuck my head underneath the elevated section to the rear, I mean, I'm not saying that they didn't comply to the standards. They did, but you know, you'd expect them to use better timbers for the joists and the barrows and what they did than just R2 treated pine. So I mean, compliant you could say, but at what standard? So, but nobody does these things. Obviously, um, um, you just need to make sure that any extensions where you can get a hold of engineering drawings, approvals, that's key. And then when you do get your building inspector, get somebody that's had a building background, not the newbies that are coming on from before you bid or before you buy. But get somebody that's been in the season in the industry before they became a building inspector, and ask them the questions. Has the extension been tied up to the main structure properly?
Yeah, so there are two elements there. The first is to make sure that you engage with your solicitor or conveyancer in terms of the legality of the extension. And then secondly, the question of the quality of the extension work and has it actually been done appropriately to regulation and appropriately in terms of the materials and stuff used. Those are really, really important questions, because if the answer is a resounding no on the first, then you're up for potentially significant issues if anybody raises it on the second. If in fact the quality of work is poor, again, you're up for significant expense. And unfortunately, so many people I speak with didn't go through that process and then find that they've got this lemon that they've got. And of course, that lemon starts to eat away at finances and becomes highly acidic and highly uncomfortable to deal with. So it is important. Edwin, I want to say thank you very much. Great show again, as always. A lot of issues covered tonight. And I guess we will do it all again next week, because the shenanigans ain't over yet.
No, we're not in the silly season yet. We get into the silly season in a couple of weeks' time. All the best, Martin. Take care.
See ya. Take care. Bye-bye.